Welcome again to English 5300. This is a short video in which I'll be introducing you to the MLA Handbook, 8th edition, the style guide for all writing that we do in the discipline of literature. As you may know, the Modern Language Association is the disciplinary organization that covers all sorts of work handled in the modern languages. So language instruction, people who teach German or Spanish, literature research, so research on modern American literature, research on medieval English literature, research on Spanish literature or French literature. That's all handled by the Modern Language Association, and they have a style guide that we're all supposed to try to follow in the writing we do in this discipline. You may be familiar with this style guide, but this refresher is intended to help you get up to speed on the 8th edition, which is a fairly recent change. In essence, there are two things you should keep in mind, or there are two types of documents that you produce in one longer essay in an English literature course. So you have the body of the essay, and then you have works cited at the end. And the sort of principle of the MLA style guide is to keep the citations that are in the body of the essay itself as brief as possible. They're supposed to be very, very efficient and short and brief. And then you have much more extensive documentation in that document that comes at the end, the work cited. So in the body of an essay, you're going to just mention an author and a location. So the page number of a novel, or the line numbers of a poem, or the act, scene, and line numbers of a play, or the page numbers or paragraph numbers of a scholarly article or book, or that sort of thing. So that very brief information generally goes within parentheses at the end of the place where you're citing it, and then the work cited is where you'll have a much more extensive set of information.
So this is the handbook for the MLA Style Guide, and it has recently been updated in a format that many of my colleagues and I don't especially like. Unfortunately, it is the current standard, so we're all supposed to at least try to adhere to it. You can get your hands on this, I'm sure, over at the library, and there are various online resources for trying to cite things according to the MLA style. I would recommend against just relying on a website to do your formatting for you, just because strange situations arise and mistakes get made all the time. So you really ought to learn the basics of this for yourself. So the three basic types of material that you'll usually have on the works cited of a paper written in the MLA style are a journal article, so a scholarly journal article, a book, a monograph, or a section of a book. So that might either be a short story, like so from the collection of all of Edgar Allan Poe's stories collected in one set, like a 4 or 5 volume set. You might have just the Cask of Amontillado as a citation, or you might have a scholarly collection of essays, and you're just going to be citing one essay within that collection. So anyway, those are the three types of main citations: an article, a monograph, or some portion of a larger kind of heterogeneous authored text. So I'd like to give you a practical example of how the two parts of a paper in the MLA style work. So the first is in the body of the essay. And I'm going to give you an example from an essay that I'm currently writing myself, which is about Shakespeare and his sonnets and the natural world. And I'm going to be using this edition of Shakespeare's sonnets, and I'm going to make a reference to a line or an argument that Charlotte Scott makes in her book. This book called Shakespeare's Nature from Cultivation to Culture. So So I'm going to write this sentence first. The first sonnet of Shakespeare's sequence uses figures drawn from the seasons and drawn from nature to chastise the young man for refusing to procreate. And then I'll write this sentence. The speaker praises the beloved who is, quote, or who is the, quote, only herald to the gaudy spring, end quote, but criticizes the beloved's selfishness because he directs his attention almost onanistically within thine own bud. Now, that is from lines 10 and 11 of Shakespeare's sonnets. And so all I have here is line 10 and 11 inside of parentheses, a parenthetical reference here at the end of the part that I've just quoted. And it's clear, it's obvious that this is coming from Shakespeare's sonnets, so I don't need any additional information here. So you might be tempted to write Shakespeare. You don't have to do that here. If it's obvious, you don't. I mean, the MLA strives to be the most efficient, so the least amount of interference in the body of the text so that you can find it readable and easy to move through the text. And then I'm going to add a quotation from that book. So I've written the sentence, although Charlotte Scott, a professor at the University of London, in her 2014 book, Shakespeare's Nature from Cultivation to Culture, notes that generally, quote, in the sonnets, the natural images tend to adhere to figurative structures predominantly associated with time and its incumbent relationship to mortality. In the first sonnet, Shakespeare does indeed gesture towards human mastery over nature through cultivation. So what I'm trying to do there is to show that I'm tweaking or slightly diverging from the general argument that Charlotte Scott makes. Now, if I could point out something really quickly, students, particularly undergraduates, will often include these bits of information right here, and this bit of information is not necessary. It's irrelevant that Charlotte Scott is a professor at the University of London. So I'm just going to delete that entirely, okay? And similarly, students will often have the title of the thing that they're quoting in the body of the essay, and that is also not necessary. You're going to have a works cited. You're going to use parenthetical citation. You don't need to have all this other information here. I understand, basically, that if you're worried about word count, you might be tempted to include this kind of information. But at the graduate level, you should not be including any of this information either in the body of the essay. It's all going to be in the work cited. But in the body of the essay, you take this out. So this sentence should just read, although Charlotte Scott notes generally, that generally in the sonnets and so on, and then that quotation comes from page 40. So we put that in a parenthetical citation down here. Now, let's talk about how to do the work cited. So let's just take a quick look at those three types. So the monograph, in our little guidebook, actually, it's described on page 34. So if you were going to be citing a book with this title, which I'm not going to attempt, Ngugi wa Thiong'o by Simon Gikandi from Cambridge University Press in 2000, and which maybe you have accessed electronically. And this is the change that the new style is trying to account for, is the fact that more often than not we encounter scholarly books, or we encounter things that we're going to have on our works cited, mediated through databases and that sort of thing. But anyway, so this is how you might cite that. You'll have the author's last name, comma, author's first name, period, the title of the book or monograph, italicized, the publisher, Cambridge UP, a comma, the year when it was published, 2000, and a period. And then if it turns out that you had accessed this through an electronic database, then you have to have this additional information, basically the website that allowed you to access the monograph, and the URL for it, and yeah, so that's a book at this point. A scholarly article would follow this format. So you read something in the Georgia Review by Anne Goldman, and it's called Questions of Transport, Reading Primo Levi, Reading Dante. from the 64th volume, issue number 1 in 2010, pages 69 to 88, and you accessed it through JSTOR. This is what it's going to look like now. You're going to have author's last name, Goldman, comma, first name, Ann, period, title of the article, inside of double quotation marks, so questions of transport, reading Primo Levi, reading Dante, period, double quotation mark. The title of the journal, italicized, so the Georgia Review, comma. So this is a new thing. If you're familiar with the previous style, this is where one of the differences is. So you put a comma after that. Then you use the abbreviation VOL period for volume 64, comma. Then the abbreviation NO period and then 1 for the first issue of the 64th volume, comma. And now again, this looks different than you may be familiar with. So you have the year, 2010, so that's no longer in parentheses as it used to be. And then PP for page number with a period, and then the first and last page, and then a period. And then the source that made it available to you, this is JSTOR, italicized with a comma after it, and then the website, the URL for that article. Now the third thing, right, something that's inside of a larger book. So an article in an edited collection on a topic, or a short story in the edited works of an author or something like that, you're going to follow this format. So for The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, found in the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, edited by James Harrison in 1902, you're going to use this format. So the author of our piece, Poe, comma, Edgar Allan, period. The title of the thing that you're citing, inside of double quotation marks, The Masque of the Red Death, period. The title of the container, the book, or the edited collection, or whatever it might be. So the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, italicized, comma. Again, this looks a little bit different than you might be familiar with if you've used the older style, but now it says edited by. So it used to just say ED, but edited by, and then the editor of that collection, the volume, if it's more than one volume. If it's just a scholarly collection of essays in one volume, you don't have a volume usually. Then the publisher. Publisher was Thomas Y. Crowell. You might have Routledge, or you might have some university press, comma, the year, comma, PP for page number with a period, first page, hyphen, last page, period. And then if you access this through some kind of electronic source, then you have to have the electronic source, Hathi Trust Digital Library, italicized, comma, and then the website for that thing, the URL.
Okay, so let me go back to that essay that I'm working on, and I'll show you how I would handle the works cited. So the second part of a document, or the second document, if you want to think of it that way, in any paper you're going to be writing, the body is the least amount, the most efficient way of citing things. The works cited is where you put the most extensive and complete amount of information. So when you finish your essay, or at the end of your essay, you're going to have something that you're going to call a works cited. And your works cited is going to have all the things that you have referred to in the body of your essay, and you're going to have that alphabetical by the last name of the author of the thing who wrote the things that you cited. So the first thing that we need to put on here is Charlotte Scott's book. So the citation is going to be last name, comma, first name, Scott, comma, Charlotte, period. Title of the book, in this case, the title of the thing you're citing, but here it's a monograph, a book all by her. We italicize that, put a period at the end. The publisher, so again, this is a little bit different from where you might have been in the previous editions of this. You no longer have to have the city, you just have the publisher. So in this case, it's Oxford University Press, and you abbreviate UP for University Press. Put a comma, the year that it was published, and a period. And that's it. I've had that book physically in my hands when I was citing it, and so I don't need to put a website or any other kind of thing like that. It's a nice, clear, basic citation format. And then the next thing, of course, is William Shakespeare. So we're going to have a citation for that edition of the sonnets that I used. So again, this is going to come after Scott because it's alphabetized. So it's Shakespeare, comma, William, period. He's the author of the sonnets. The book is called The Sonnets. It's italicized with a period at the end.
Now that is an edited version of the sonnets. It was edited by Stephen Oracle, and that's important to include if you're using your primary sources when you're referring to a play of Shakespeare or John Milton's poetry or an edition of Melville or whatever it might be. If that is an edited version, you need to make sure you include who edited that edition. If you're taking a class on very modern, very contemporary literature, there may not be an editor. I mean, you might actually, like, the book might be 2 years old and it's just being sold by, Harper's or something like that, and so you don't have to worry about an editor. But if the text is edited by someone, make sure you include that information. Anyway, period at the end of that, publisher, comma, so that was Penguin, and then the year that it was published, so this was 2001, period at the end. And so with that, that's how you do that. This is an example of me creating a works cited. Now we're going to turn our attention to looking at a kind of in the wild example of MLA format with a period. So that's how the guidebook says to do it. And then just kind of to sort of look this up in the wild, we're going to take a look at something in the MLA online really quickly. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point is just very briefly show you an example of using the MLA style in the wild, so to speak. So I've gone to the University Library webpage. I clicked on the tab for e-journals. I have typed in the title of the flagship journal in our discipline. It's called PMLA, or the Publication of the Modern Language Association. It comes out 6 times a year with a bunch of articles and various other bits of communication from our discipline to practitioners in the discipline. But of course, that's going to have the most current version of the style of the MLA style guide. Is in effect if you look at an article from this journal. So I clicked in PMLA. That brings us to this page, which shows us that the library has access to this journal. So I clicked on Modern Language Association Journal, so that's going to get us to the most recent issue of the journal. And that takes us to this page. Actually, it takes us to this page. And so the most recent issue of the journal at this point is from March of 2018. So you click on this, and this shows you the table of contents of the most recent issue. So I'm just going to pick a kind of random one here. Well, not random, but an actual article on a scholarly topic. And I've just picked this Kara Gaston's Forms and Celestial Motion in Chaucer's Complaint of Mars. So I click on that PDF. That takes us to this article. So here is a piece of scholarly writing that's following the current version of the MLA Style Guide. And so if you just look at an example down here about the second paragraph, the author, Kara Gaston, writes, and let me just show you this article, by the way. So this is the title of the article. Here's the author of the article. Here's a little bit of information about Kara Gaston. Anyway, and so this is on page 282 of that journal. And she writes in the midst of her article, for example, Frances Ferguson explains that the octave of a sonnet, quote, could be said to be formally achieved in that it would not disappear simply because you were not attending to it, end quotation marks, 234, parentheses, comma. Okay, so what that's showing you, right, is that this author, Gaston, does not give you a ton of information. She gives you the author's name, Frances Ferguson, and she gives you the page number where her quotation that she's using is found. That's all the information that's necessary at this point. Now you could read through the rest of the article and, whatever, it's 10, 12 pages or something like that. Scrolling on down towards the end, you'll see there are end notes. This is the MLA. The MLA prefers end notes to footnotes. And the MLA prefers basically to have the fewest possible notes that you can. I mean, MLA articles generally don't have a ton of endnotes or notes of any kind. It's mostly using parenthetical citation within the text of the essay. Anyway, here's the work cited. If we scroll down here to find that Ferguson, we'll find it right here. So Frances Ferguson, the article, the essay, was entitled Jane Austen, Emma, and the impact of form, and it's in a book by Wolfson and Brown on pages 231 to 255. So you would have to go a little bit farther down to Wolfson and Brown, which is right over here. So it's Wolfson, Susan J., and Marshall Brown, who are the editors of a book called Reading for Form, the University of Washington Press, 2006. You see that's a very clean and efficient little works cited here. Anyway, I'm going to show you a couple other types of things that are on this works cited. So you've got a, let's see, here is a scholarly monograph, Eleanor Johnson. So Johnson, comma, Eleanor, the title of the book in italics, Practicing Literary Theory Today, with a period. U of Chicago P for the University of Chicago Press, that's the publisher, comma, 2013, that's the year, period. That is how you would cite a scholarly monograph or a book of any kind that's just a book by one author on the works cited of something. If you're citing an article nowadays, so here is the very first thing on here is by someone called Ann W. Astle, and her article is so somewhere in Gaston's article, she has cited Ann Astle, and the title of the article is Orpheus, Eurydice, and the Double Sorrow of Chaucer's Troilus. So that's in italics with a period, in double quotation marks with a period at the end. Here's the title of the journal, Chaucer Review, italicized with a comma, VOL period, so volume 23, comma, NO period or number 4, comma, 1989, comma, PP period 283 to 99 period. So that is a journal citation according to the current version of the MLA style sheet. And then here's another good example. So this is Christopher Cannon that's a citation for an article in an edited collection. So the edited collection is it's a book, between covers called Middle English, which was edited by Paul Strom from Oxford in 2007. So the full citation for that would be, if referring to this article, so presumably Gaston refers to Christopher Cannon, this essay that he wrote called Form, some page numbers in there or whatever, that's up in the essay itself. And here we're just going to have Cannon, comma, Christopher, so the person who wrote the article or essay, period. The title of the article or essay in double quotation marks. It's a nice short article title, Form, so Form, period, double quotation marks. The title of the book, the cover of that edited collection, Middle English, italicized, comma, edited by Paul Strom, comma, the publisher, Oxford UP, comma, the year, 2007, comma, PP period 177 to 90. So that's the page numbers of that article. So that is a in the wild, so to speak, look at the three main types of things that you might have on the works cited of anything that you write. An article from a journal, an article or an essay, or maybe a short story or whatever in a collection of other things, or a monograph, a book all by one person, all on one topic. That would also cover a novel, for instance. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Now that you have had this, please start trying to follow this the citation format in your writing in this class, and of course in your writing in the other graduate seminars you might be taking this term.